Spanish, there's a saying, cada cabeza es un mundo, which literally translated means every head is a world, or more colloquially understood, every mind is their own world. And in a world of roughly 8 billion people, not every brain is going to think in the same way. And this diversity is what makes humanity so beautiful. On this episode, I have a chat with Dr. Ned Sahin about the company he founded, BrainPower. BrainPower uses their software combined with hardware from the world's biggest tech companies to benefit people with invisible neural challenges, their families, and their teachers. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is Wi-Fi and Water. Dr. Ned Sahin, welcome to Wi-Fi and Water. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am also doing well. It is Wednesday, which is the middle of the week, and it doesn't feel like a Wednesday. Does that make any sense when I say that?
Well, because we've been in perpetual blurs day since last March.
That's right. Thank you for I've never heard of that, but I'm going to start to incorporate that into my conversation. Total blurs day, because the way I feel about life now is how I felt when I was younger and my parents, sometimes we'd vacation and we'd go on cruises. And I didn't understand it then as a child why they would push cruises, but I understand it now as I see my friends who have kids, because it's like on a cruise, you're contained. No matter what you do, you're probably going to be on the boat, likely, right? And on the cruises, they would have, the one thing I remember as a kid is they would have the doormats or the mats in the elevators would have the days of the week, because you were in blurs day and you would forget what day it is because it was Groundhog's Day. And so exactly, that's why it doesn't feel like a Wednesday. Here we are today, and I'm really happy to have you on, and we're going to talk about BrainPower. So why don't you tell us a little bit about BrainPower, how it started, why it started? Go.
So you, and in this case, I mean you, anyone watching or listening to this, do you know someone who has autism or someone who has a family member with autism, maybe even ADHD? These things are very common. And they're thought of in various different ways. But in the end, what matters is that to integrate into society as an adult, we need certain life skills. And those life skills are important for everyone, all across every spectrum. But for people on the autism spectrum, they're particularly difficult. Things like understanding what emotions other people are feeling, or even yourself, or looking toward people in a way that makes them feel important and heard. So if these skills are difficult for people and not having them makes it hard to get a job or keep a relationship, then why can't we train these skills the way we train the skills for baseball or even for math? And we can, it turns out, but there wasn't the right technology or even the right political will in the past necessarily to do this. So after my PhD, which was in the science of the brain, cognitive neuroscience, I started a company called BrainPower to empower people whose brains were a little different. And we used wearable technology. This is Google Glass. And no one really knew what to do with Google Glass. We use it as a wearable life coach. So I look through this tiny screen here. That's a computer screen. I can see through it. I can still see you. And I get feedback that turns regular life into a video game. And what do I mean by that? Well, if the goal is to look towards someone, one of our video games draws a digital circle around the person's face that follows them as you move or they move. And the circle completes as you look toward them, stops as you look away. And when it completes, you get a reward. The person's face turns into a digital cartoon. It's fun. All along, you're getting points. We never punish or remove points, but you won't get them if you're not looking toward the person. And that feels engaging. That feels fun. And if you wonder whether someone with autism would put something funny on her or his head, well, we have clinical studies showing they do, they like it, and they even improve in these social skills. And it doesn't feel stressful or burdensome. Eye contact for any primate is potentially stressful. So we want to make sure that we counteract any potential stress with the fun of the game and the removability of the whole thing. And we do. And then we move on to emotions. So I can look toward you. The AI in this tiny little computer will determine whether you're happy or sad or angry or suffering a fit of existential pique. Who knows? Not necessarily that. And I'll get a prompt to play the game to guess. And when I get it right, I get points and rewards. If I don't, I get to try it again. And we have other games like that that help with transitioning to new environments that could be scary, getting over just the crush of being in a restaurant or a supermarket with announcements coming at you and all of that terribleness if you're sensory sensitive. So we focus on people whose brains compute the world a little bit differently and try to make it easier for them to learn how to integrate with the way the world expects us to be. Now, I'd like to change that the world expects us to be a certain cookie cutter way, and I have efforts toward that in the general world of neurodiversity and understanding of neurodiversity. But along the way, there are some practical and real constraints on passing an interview or a date, which is a type of interview, and letting the other person know that you care, that you're cognitively there, and that you're engaged. And so these social skills are relevant for that, and they are gating skills. Get through that gate into the rest of the ways that people evaluate us and that we can enjoy interacting with people or just doing what it is we want to do. So to summarize that, brain power, we sell products. This isn't just research. We sell the product of the software and the hardware, which we get from Google, and we have a great relationship with them. And schools or parents can buy this for the students or children who have these challenges, and they play it like a video game, but only for half an hour a day, maybe a little bit more, but you don't have to wear it all the time. And we've shown clinical data that say this works, and works is measured in terms of real and tangible skills and performance on IEPs, which are how schools measure these things. And in the end, the people on the spectrum report that they feel more confident and feel better integrated. And the people around, like teachers and parents, feel more connected, more directly connected and valued by the person.
One of the things I noticed on the website, it was talking about, and it gave an example, a real world example. You could see a video of a child who is neurodiverse. And it's like, this is better than an iPad, because with an iPad, you're not interacting. With an iPad, you're just doing what everyone on the planet essentially is doing, which is walking around with their cell phone,
just
6
looking
inches
down like this. Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
If we want someone to come back out into the world and interact, and we give them a highly appealing other world, then we're totally working against the idea of getting someone to look up and out into the world. There's a little bit more to that. So the way we are, our ears focus toward a source of noise. Our eyes, of course, look at what we're looking at. The rest of our sensory apparatus, it's tunable. We're like a satellite dish, our face. And so if you're focused down, you're in this different world, and it's designed to entertain you, right? If you pick your head up or are forced to, suddenly you hear different things, see different things, and there's this crush of social expectations, these wobbly, confusing things called other humans that have demands upon you. And that's an affront at any time. You pull away a kid's iPad, any kid, they're gonna kind of hate you. That was entertaining and predictable, and you're not. But now someone who has social anxiety and has failed other social interactions and wants to do well, wants to figure it out, but needs to get there by incremental step. You take away that iPad, and now you're really causing this major transition. Instead, if I'm wearing the interaction, I'm wearing the gamification, I don't have that transition between down and up. And in fact, the way I built and designed these things, the games, it requires you to interact with another person for most of them. There's some self-exploration as well, and some anxiety accommodation tools and other things, but many of them you interact with another person. So you already have that interaction going on. If you take this off, well, you still have that. You're not changing this phonic and visual environment. So Yeah, I mean, shortly stated, with an iPad, you're looking down, and with this, you're looking up.
One of the other things you mentioned that I found really like, wow, because it just hit was you said, you were doing your PhD in, I believe, neuroscience, and you finished that, but you made a comment that was kind of like, I didn't have the technology, like my dream. I was literally in a dreaming greater than where our technological advances could take us. And that made me think of the classic story I heard about James Cameron, because for years he had it on the books to make Avatar,
Yeah.
but the technology didn't allow for that to happen. And so, how long ago had you been thinking about your avatar, which is brain power and this amazing technology? And are you thinking now about different ideas? Are you dreaming now about different things that our technology even today still doesn't allow us to do? And if so, what is that? Because it may sound super strange. I mean, technology is really an interesting thing. Can you imagine, growing up, we were told don't talk to strangers, right? Growing up, we were told don't get in cars with strangers. And then now, if you took a 90s parent and dropped them in 2021 and people are getting in Ubers, is there something in the future that you're really excited to bring to market to help out seemingly anyone, but especially focusing on the neurodiverse, that maybe we can't do today just because of the constraints of technology?
It was fundamentally impossible to do what we're doing now at Brainpower just a few years before I founded Brainpower. In fact, when I founded Brainpower, I had ideas about augmented reality, about creating this mixed world where a person is living in the real world, but having all sorts of extra information just at the right time for that person. And that wasn't even possible then. We hacked into Google Glass. Google loves us because we've done more with their device than they really anticipated as being possible. We've turned this kind of a wearable notification device into this two-way, rich neural enhancement. It's almost a cognitive prosthesis. Like you could have a bionic eye, you get that concept, but this is for the mind, right? So in any way, it was fundamentally impossible to do what Brainpower is doing now in the years before, and even when we founded Brainpower. Since then, we've had massive advances in computer vision. You see that with the self-driving cars that are just coming through, but you can see those little videos of them identifying thousands of objects as they pass them rapidly. We've had advances in artificial intelligence of other kinds and machine learning. We've had advances in miniaturization of hardware and cloud hosting of software and edge computation, where you can shift between what's done on the device and what's done on the cloud. We've had advances in society. And I think this is one of the most important things. We talk about technology enabling things. It's true, but society has to be ready to receive them. When Google Glass first came out, people were very worried that it has a camera on it, because with a camera, we're going to invade other people's privacy. One of the biggest ironies is I would be on a subway train or out in public, and I'd see people doing this, like kind of trying to take a photo of me because I'm wearing Google Glass, and they want to show it to their friends or maybe even lambast me unbeknownst to myself on social media, because there's that jerk wearing a camera. Like, you're pointing a camera at me to capture that using a device that 5 years previous, people were saying, oh, when those things are around, people will have cameras in locker rooms and it'll be terrible and the whole world will end. Well, actually, if you bring one of these in a locker room, start pointing it at someone, it's going to be self-policing. They're going to figure out you shouldn't be doing that. It'll just be fine. And so they were holding cameras at me. Meanwhile, all of this was being observed by the cameras that are ambiently everywhere, on trains, on buses, and in the environment. But it just felt different than I have it here. And guess what? When I need to take a photo with this, I have to go like this and press a button. But anyway, society needed to be willing to receive the new innovation, because the innovation isn't in the bits and bytes and silicon. The innovation is in how we use things and how we interact with each other. And this posed a whole new concept. I'm wearing the computer, I'm interacting with it, and I see something that you don't. And it was new and it was different. It's also funny because the face is not just that satellite dish that we use to see the world, but it's how the world sees us. The symmetry of your face is associated with beauty because it associates with the part of your genetic system that controls your immune system, the major histocompatibility complex. The symmetry of your face is literally the future of your health. It's also the past of your health. If you've been sick or you've been in a lot of fights, your face will show it, and it'll show it asymmetrically. So how your face is a very, very important symbol of just what your genetic past and future will be. And it's also so many other things that we label as beauty, but which recommend that person to you as a potential match or not, or a potentially aggressive other human. And humans mostly have two types of enemies, things a trillionth their size and each other. So it does matter to figure out if this other human is an aggressor. So putting something on the face is kind of dangerous. I say dangerous meaning from the point of view of a product company, because if I'm going to block half of someone's face, I'm challenging that symmetry. I'm also putting something in the most prominent part of the person. So I better have customer base who's really willing to do that with all the social awkwardness that it entails. And I think, again, society wasn't ready for that. Google Glass it confused people as to what this was and what it was for. But I saw it as a fundamental new gateway into possibility space, the possibility space for augmenting our existence for benefit, for good, not to spy on some random person who's, by the way, taking a picture of me, but to give someone who struggles to interact with other people, someone who doesn't even know how to indicate to his mom that he loves her, to help that person with just-in-time feedback. And then, this is something we can talk about more later, but to then make that feedback slowly fade away so the person can take off the prosthesis and move forward with becoming a more self-actualized, independent, self-sufficient human being, which is our fundamental goal.
Thinking about the actual hardware, seeing it on your face, and now I'm like asking myself all these very like technical questions, just out of 100% curiosity. Does that need to be linked up with like an Apple Watch? I know it's a Google product and I'm mixing, oil and water here, but does it need to be linked up with something else that you wear, your smartphone? Do you need to have an iPad in your backpack while you wear it? Or does it download the data, keep it, and then when you link up, it's in the cloud and then it connects? And then most importantly, because this is where I think a lot of technology is kind of held back by, right, is the power of the battery. How long is the battery work before you have to, charge it? I'm assuming it has a large charge life, but I also don't know.
So the device itself, Google Glass, is freestanding. And the way we use it makes it freestanding in that we can use it. You don't need it to be paired to your phone. You don't need to be paired to a watch or anything like that. So when I wear it, I have a complete system on me right now. And that's because of how we use it. We've made it so that I can interact with you and get data on how that interaction went. It connects to the internet when it's possible. And that allows me to see the data afterward from my session. So I interact with you. You're my teacher, then you get to see the data afterward on how that interaction went, and am I getting better this month at the specific skill that we're trying to teach. And then that you see through a cloud-based, highly secure, very professionally coded web login. But the device itself can do what it does, and next time it connects, it'll push up the data. If you have a good connection between the device and your network, then you can play along on the web side, and you can kind of see what each other sees, and it becomes more interactive, and it's quite fun, but it's not required. You asked about battery life, and the battery life is very long if you don't turn on the device.
Well played, sir. Well played.
Yeah. So the battery is a 508 milliamp hour battery in this rear lobe, and that powers the computer that's in here, which has a CPU, Wi-Fi chip and Bluetooth and GPS and accelerometer and magnetometer and gyroscope, and of course an optic system that has a little screen that bounces around on this mirror prism so you could see it even though it's 1 centimeter away from you. It has an infrared sensor. It has a blink and wink sensor. It has microphones. It's a pretty amazing little computer here. The battery lasts kind of like cell phones used to be a few years ago. Not quite enough, but not terrible.
What does the image look like? Because I just can't even, I've never worn one. What I have worn, and once again, this is not a Google product, but I've worn Facebook Oculus, and I was very impressed. And this was back even in 2017, and I was very impressed with the pixelation and its ability to kind of mimic real life in a sense. Because I guess in my mind, before I put it on, the story in my head was like, this is not going to work, right? This is like some clown game. This is like some carny game. But then I put it on, it was very realistic. So how real are the images or the image or the screen that your eye will then engage with?
Okay, so when I'm wearing these glasses for brain power software, I look through and I can see in this screen enough to give the illusion that I'm having basically two worlds. I'm here with you, and I also have my private world that's giving me the information I need. We've coded it within the constraints of the device so that it has images and lines and points and rewards and such that I can see. It's enough. To describe the experience is a little bit difficult because you might be surprised that you can see this one world that's giving you all this feedback and the real world, and you can handle it, right? Oh my gosh, are you going to get distracted, or you're going to fall down and smash into walls and drop to the full floor and smash your face? No, you don't do that. You don't do that when you're walking and you might see a sign above you, like in the train that tells you when the next one is coming. You can pay attention to two things. If you're in the gym and you're watching TV, usually you don't drop weights on your lap or smash into machines as you're walking by. You can handle the fact that there is a TV there and there's other things that you're doing. It is possible to fall on a treadmill, but generally not. So we already know how to manage multiple streams of information. In fact, a person there and a waiter coming toward you and your own plate at a restaurant, multiple streams of information, we can handle them. And we can also handle the filling in between scenes of one thing and another. You watch a movie and it pans around and it jumps from scene to scene. You can fill that in. So likewise, I'm seeing some information. It's telling me something about what's going on, like it's telling me where a face is or whether the person is happy or sad or having me guess that fact. We can fill it in. So that's kind of a longer and yet a little bit abstract answer. I can give a more succinct answer. So you asked, what does it feel like to look through this screen? I'd say it's kind of like being in a room where there's a TV up on the wall. You can see a lot that's going on the TV. You can read words at the bottom. You can feel like you're part of that world. There's your favorite movie. Man, you immerse in it, even though it's a 16th of your visual field. We can do that. And we can also immerse in that movie and yet not trip over ourselves and smash our face on the floor. We're able to manage being in sort of two worlds at once. And that's what this gives you the ability to do, except you're the only one who sees it. And it's customized to what your brain needs at that moment.
Within the neurodiverse community, what is one of the biggest obstacles that brain power really hopes to coach and improve upon?
Well, the world needs all different kinds of minds, but right now it doesn't employ them. People on the autism spectrum, even with college degrees, have a 20% chance of getting a job. I mean, it's staggering. 80% unemployment. So 1 out of 5 gets a job. And that's stunning. So let's work backward from there. What are some of the things that cause this disconnect? You might have someone who's really good at art or really good at software coding or really likely to be a very loyal employee and to get into the rhythm of your company and stay there and not depart and really be a good contributor, and yet won't get that opportunity. What gets in the way? A lot of it centers around the interview as well as interactions with colleagues. So during an interview, there's an expectation set by basically the other 98% of people walking through, if you're talking about autism, which is between 1% and 2%, or whatever the percentage is. The expectation is kind of how people generally behave. If someone behaves differently, that's scary to a potential employer. What's going to happen? What are other people going to understand this person and work well with her? Is this person trying to cause a problem? Is this person willfully being like disrespectful to me? Why didn't she look at me? Why didn't he laugh when I made that joke? Any of these little things, a regular employer could be excused for not understanding, right? Because there isn't as easy a pathway between, there's a difference in this person and that causes this difference behavior, but it doesn't impact work. You know that if the person is just French and is speaking in a French accent and uses a word in a way that's confusing to you, you're like, well, okay, maybe look at that. They speak French and English and I don't. So that's kind of amazing. They just made a few funny statements in English. But if the person has a different language of thought, a different way of breaking down the world, and then says something that throws you for a loop, it's like, wait, why'd you do that? Did you intend to insult me, or what's going on? Or if that person looks to the corners of the room and not at you. So it could be emotional mirroring that's just not there that causes I don't understand this person. This person doesn't seem to understand me. It could be that eye contact thing. And eye contact is stressful, but it also, why do we make eye contact, or why do we look towards people? Really, why? Think about it. Why do we look toward people? There's many answers. One is to show that we're there, to show that we care, and to show how our mind works because of the little things that we do to mirror back what they're saying, laugh at just the right moment, and throw in a little interjection. We also do it to get information. The other person's face is going to tell us, is the person angry or bored or happy? It's going to tell us what the next thing is. Is there a pause? Am I supposed to do something now? There are all these little unwritten rules of social engagement that actually should be written. And that's part of what we do. We help write the unwritten rules in Java and turn them into a game so that the person can step through these different hurdles. Let's take the analogy again as if it's language. If you're learning a new language, whether it's Urdu or Arabic or Mandarin Chinese, it's a lot of work to learn that language. When you don't know it very well, you're going to come across as kind of stupid because you just can't speak, and then come across as maybe aggressive or insulting because you think you said it right, but you got a word that contextually is wrong. Or you might come across as culturally insensitive, refer to something that you just shouldn't, but how are you going to know that? Again, that's a language, human language, we have that experience, but imagine if the neurodiversity, if your mind is thinking of things differently, then you just might not connect with that person. So brain power focuses in that whole gamut, that whole can of worms of these soft skills, which are the hard skills to learn, and focuses on things that help you interact with other people.
I've never thought of it with that analogy of learning languages. And I think it makes so much sense. And now thinking about the interview process, because anyone listening to this, I promise you've had an interview in your life. I don't care whether it was for the job you've had now. We've all had that very painful experience of sitting across from someone, knowing that you can do the job and just feeling like I have to go through this prom level awkward photo taking situation just so I can get that job.
It's a human experience that we have. So you don't have to be autistic to have an awkward interview. You don't have to have ADHD to struggle to know what's the next thing to do and to get excited by the squirrel over there. And we are human. We have this experience. And then some people have more or less of it than others. And there's diversity of how our brain works all over the place. You know that some people sleep a short amount. Some people sleep a lot every night. Some people can take a 4-minute nap and be recharged. Some people, if it's, even a 30-minute nap, then they're just down for the night. People have this difference in how their brain works. People have difference in how they hear things, how they see things, and certainly how they remember what you said during an argument. And so we have these differences, and some people have these structural differences that really change how they're going to interact in a social situation. And enough so that it just falls outside the jerry-rigged line of what normal is. Normal self-defines. Normal self-defines. You have 20 people who stand facing the wall of an elevator and one person who faces the door. They just define normal as get into an elevator and keep standing the way you are, face towards the wall. And the person who stands frontward is awkward. Why is it the other way? It turns out you're supposed to walk into an elevator, turn around, and face a random door with nothing on it. That's what normal is. If you walk into an elevator and face the back wall, people are going to move away from you. They think you're weird. Well, normal is arbitrary, and normal self-defines. And if you put the 2% of people in a room who do something different from the rest, they are the non-normal. And they're looked at as funny. And it's not very funny because they don't get the job. They don't get a romantic partner. And their health outcomes are much worse, partly for the first two reasons. A job gives you an event horizon. A job gives you something to look forward to and people who will notice when you're not there. A romantic partner is the one who finds you when you fall in the evening on the way to the bathroom, when you don't show up for something, when you don't call for something. There's someone in the world who's your buddy. Remember the buddy system? Well, your romantic partner is also your buddy. And so there's so many ways that we can fall in life and have accidents or have health issues that someone else could notice. And that's one of the many reasons why people just do less well in many aspects of life as a result of neurodiversity. Doesn't physically cause you to be less healthy necessarily, but having no one looking after you at a job or in your personal and romantic life is a downside. So it's just one of those sadnesses that we hope we can address, and we know we can address by helping teach the skills that make others feel they can relate to us.
The elevator, that's an extremely good example because I've never thought about it. We've all got an elevator. You turn around. Maybe the reason why you face the door is because you have to push the button.
But
there are other reasons. There are automatic elevators that you could get in. You don't have to touch any buttons, but you'll still turn and face the door. Is there a kind of, I'm thinking, I'm like racking my brain. What kind of a program would teach something like that? Like
Exactly.
That seems very
cool. So we don't think you have to teach them because you just know. You just know. Oh, they don't teach that in school, they say. Well, it's a literal truth. Social emotional learning. They don't teach that in school in the 1980s, in the 1990s. They're just starting now. But it doesn't mean you can't teach it in school. You can teach how to pass an interview. You can teach how to go on a date. Imagine that. High school teaches you how to fail at dating by just throwing you in, but it doesn't teach you actually how to do it. Would we have less divorce? Would we have happier kids? Would we have better workers because they're not struggling and fighting at home if we just taught people how to have a relationship and how to end one? But we don't do it, and society doesn't. So I'm trying to get in there. It's between the educational system and the healthcare system because both of them say, not my problem. And I say, then it's a human problem and I want to help.
So you're in between the health system and the educational system. Yep. Realizing it's a human problem. And now we're in a global pandemic. And I have been very interested into what's going to happen after the global pandemic, looking at marginalized communities in the United States. If we're just looking at communities of color and you're thinking about that as something that's being marginalized and how it will long-term affect these families compared to not marginalized families, are going to have worse outcomes in the long run. Maybe they don't have access to the internet. Maybe they don't have the hardware. Maybe they don't have a computer. Maybe they don't have a quiet place where they can study. Maybe they don't have X, Y, and Z and a bunch of other things. I also have many years spent working in Colombia and Guatemala specifically in the more socioeconomically strapped areas, which is a diplomatic way of saying the poor areas of those places. And I know how important education is in those areas to lift people up and to, create some type of upward mobility, social and both economical. And so taking students out of the classroom, maybe 1 billion students over the globe during the pandemic, that is going to have reverberations for the rest of our lives and how that's going to affect educational outcomes for everyone. But it's not going to be even because nothing really is seemingly ever even in our society, unfortunately. How is this time out of school and out of classrooms for someone that's neurodiverse, or if you just want to focus on the 2%, the 1% to 2%, as you were saying, people on the autistic spectrum, how is that going to affect them? And I'm assuming this is where Brain Power, and I think it's the Brain Power Academy, which is all about, empowering people from home. Talk to me about those obstacles and how we're going to get through them, especially focusing on if we're just going to look at the neurodiverse community.
Well, I'm going to give you some bad news and then some good news. So the bad news is the global pandemic is going to affect the people who already had a tough time worse. So let's go to a good day. On a good day, everything is fine, economy is fine, things are great. It's still much harder to be Black than to be white in America. It's still much harder to be autistic than to be neurotypical, as you say, anywhere in the world. In fact, worse if you're not in America generally. And during a time when things are constrained, economy is down for most people and resources are down and people are getting sick and people are stressed at home, it gets worse for the people for whom it was already bad. The Black community gets more of the virus, gets the virus worse, gets less access to doctors and fancy biologic therapy, and then they get the vaccine last, right? People with autism crave structure and predictability and clarity. The whole world lacks leadership. No one knows what's coming next because suddenly we're a slave to something a trillionth our size, and the would-be leaders just didn't show up. So now everyone lacks clarity and consistency. So people who need that more do worse. Stress kills. Stress, literally, in other animals, if you cause psychological stress, they can just drop dead. Turns out humans are a little more resilient than that. Our panic attacks feel like you're going to die, but usually don't. But nonetheless, stress kills slowly through neuroinflammatory means, through causing you to make mistakes, and just general grinding down. So this is a very stressful time. It's going to be more stressful in homes with a kid on the autism spectrum. Of course it is. I believe there's a higher likelihood of divorce in those families, although I've seen data now in both directions. But if there's a divorce, then there's 50% less parents involved in a home, right? And usually less money. Money is important in this case to have therapy and care and access to resources and convenience factors like getting your groceries delivered. So with more stress at home, let's say, what's stress? Oh, I'm a little bit stressed about something. No, we're talking about really, really debilitating stress. We don't like to talk about it, but we know that parents harm their children. They're going to harm their children more if they're more stressed, if they drink more, if they have more financial, existential fear of ruin. And so those kids are in greater danger, and they're in much greater danger if already parenting is very stressful. If, as a parent, you don't know why the child is crying, if the child never looks at you, never says, I love you, that's harder to do that one-way act called love. And it's just unrealistic if someone is trying to hold down 2 or 3 jobs to survive and now has 0. Guess what? Life's really hard. And so life's going to be extra hard for people for whom it was already extra hard, whether you're poorer than the average or you have a brain difference in yourself or your child, or if you are in not the majority. So if you're Black, or if you're trans, or if you are Latino, and if you don't speak the host language very, very well, these are all things that make life harder. And it gets worse on a bad day. The disparity gets worse. So, did I help? Tons of bad news. Tons of bad news. We have good news too. In this digital age, we can address people uniformly across the world with the push of a button that updates software. We strangely have put extremely expensive supercomputers in the pockets of nearly everyone. So someone who's lower income may not be able to upgrade to the newest iPhone, but for whatever reason, we have smartphones in most people's pockets. And there's a lot to that. But one reason is the drive is so high. It's a social device. It's your connection to the world. And it's kind of magical. Maybe it's addictive, but it's also magical. So we have the ability to bring software to people's lives. We don't yet have the ability to do this because this kind of computing is not pervasive yet. We will get there. But schools can provide it, and schools have a budget that allows them to have equipment and facility for all their students. And once you have it, it's given by need. So if this kid is on free or discounted lunch, and this kid comes in with the newest French designer jeans every day, doesn't matter. Parents may be able to afford it or not, depending on that, but the school has it, the school will give it to the person who needs it. Free and appropriate public education. That's what is guaranteed by law in America. And that's the good news. I'm sorry, there is still that bad news. It's the communities that have less money because they have lower income. Their schools don't have as much funding locally. The federal government tries to equalize that as much as possible. It's never perfect, but I don't want to get into detailed politics of this. In general, schools can provide. And so we at Brainpower sell to the schools. We sell to parents also, but we sell to the schools partly to support the mission. You train one teacher, you have 30 kids each half year, more or less, and you sell to one parent, you have one kid. So we try to do both, but by getting to schools, we can support the mission more broadly, and the schools will give the service or product or capability to those who need, not to those who could afford.
I was reading on the website that you have clients in 10 different countries. Can you speak a little bit about that? Where's the reach? Because one of my hopes is if someone has their master's in international development, and when the pandemic is over, I'm already making plans to get back out there, like in the field, I guess, as you could say. Are they in the global South? And if they aren't in the global South, what's potential future plans to try to get them down there and try to get this technology to the neurodiverse that maybe aren't in Europe or Europe or North America, as far as Canada or the United States?
Our mission at Brainpower is to empower every brain, whether you're in Boston or Belgrade or Bangladesh or Mombasa. And it shouldn't matter. It's additionally more relevant, I think, the further you get from America or from Western Europe. And not for the usual reasons of just kind of money and access. There is much greater stigma over mental health concerns in many countries. And I'd say even in rich countries. So it's not the same dimension as usual. So in the UAE, in Dubai, this is a bizarrely rich part of the world. There's a strong stigma against mental health. Don't talk about it. And we went to Dubai, we visited some very large autism centers, and they cater also to Emiratis and also to the expat community where it's a little more acceptable. And it's difficult because if you are speaking about something that people don't want to admit from the first place, it's going to be a hard conversation. So getting into some subtleties here, but generally, if you try to take something from one cultural context to another, you can't just translate the user's guide. into the language. It's a cultural translation. You translate the use, how it fits into how people use and behave with things. So in that case, when thinking about Dubai, it became not an autism tool, fix a problem, because they don't want to admit they have a problem. The parent doesn't. It's more, here is a business skills training tool. You want to do well in business? It's important to be social. It's important to relate to the other person. Business in Asia is often done very much person to person and over food. And that includes the Arabian Peninsula, that part, near parts of Asia. And so social interactions are very important. So we can say, hey, do you have a child who could use some help building those business skills of social interaction? Well, here's a nice wearable training tool. Never say the word autism. There's the cultural translation involved in that. I think it's very important for reaching many places. Now, realistically, there's some access to technology issues and such in many countries. We try as best to address those and to make the software light, to make the hardware shareable, to work with many platforms, to do as much as we can with the mobile phone platform, which does reach much of the world, even those with vastly less income than we're accustomed to in the US. Somehow mobile phones become part of the ecosystem because of their importance for connection to others. So, I mean, you ask basically how broad could our reach be, and can we reach the people who need it the most outside of the US and West? Nothing should stop us. Let's keep going. Let's reach every brain.
One of the most fascinating things that I'm taking away from this conversation is that humans aren't limited by our technology. We're really limited by what we as a society, when you put 100 people in a room, what we deem as okay. Or I don't want to use the word normal because I don't really like that word in any context, because nothing's really normal. It's just what's perceived as most common or something like that.
Yeah.
What is it that humanity really needs to do in the future to make it a little bit easier for those who are neurodiverse? How do we as humans, how does myself as a neurotypical person make the world better for the neurodiverse? And I ask this because I think a lot of times for me, as someone who's born in a different country and naturalized as a citizen here, who's a dual citizen, who totally self-defines as a Hispanic Latino man, I get really grounded in that. And that is where I see the world through that lens, because we all see the world through our own lenses, right? Through our own built-in Google Glass, which is really what you're talking about. And seeing that only 1% to 2% of people will be autistic or on the autism spectrum, for the 98% of the people listening to this podcast, what can they do now after hearing this to make the world better for the neurodiverse?
We fundamentally see other people and their actions as being like us, but just a little different, or just acting in a certain way. We fundamentally start from self in order to understand someone else and then modify. And that's just wrong. We need to simulate the life of someone else and think from there how different every person's life is. There's 8 billion people on the world. There's 8 billion worlds. Each person sees a different world and forgets necessarily how you created that world. You create the world by some things you can't change. You're massive athletic person, or you're really struggle with your physical body and maybe have a weak heart, you're gonna have a very different world around you that you see. Even how you treat others, we're always told, helps them how they will treat you. But if it's inadvertent how you are showing up to other people, the way they treat you will be very different. And we have to remember that. So the point is empathy for how other people see the world because of things they can't necessarily choose?
Well, I want to thank you for joining us here on Wi-Fi and Water, Dr. Ned Sahin. Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode. And if you'd like to learn more about Ned's work and brainpower, please visit their website at www.brain-power.com or find them on Instagram at brainpowerasd. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Wi-Fi and Water Podcast. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.